Welcome to RhAPPcast, the official podcast of Rheumatology Advanced Practice Providers. I am your host, Amanda Mixon, president of RhAPP. Thank you for joining us today for another insightful episode where we dive really deep into the world of rheumatology. Today's episode, entitled Biosimilars Unveiled, Empowering APPs for Better Patient Conversations, and focuses on enhancing our ability to educate and discuss biosimilars with our patients. We're going to explore the crucial role advanced practice providers play in patient education and how we effectively communicate the benefits and considerations of biologics. I actually can't really think of better people to do this. I think most people who talk to APPs or know APPs would say that this is something we are naturally very good at. And so joining me today is Kyle George, a fellow board member of RhAPP and a seasoned expert in the field. Welcome, Kyle.
Hey, thanks, Amanda. Thanks for having me back. For those who don't know me, my name is Kyle George, and I've been a PA since 2008, have been in rheumatology since 2016, and have been a part of the RhAPP board since 2021. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about our topic today. And together we're going to share the hurdles we've encountered in our practice related to biosimilars, discuss strategies to overcome these challenges, and answer some of the most common questions we receive from patients, questions that we've also gathered from you, our listeners. So whether you're on your commute, taking a break, or tuning in from your clinic, get ready to gain new insights and tools to help you have a more meaningful and effective conversation with your patients about biosimilars. Again, I know I'm being asked this question almost now on a weekly basis as insurance is mandating changes, etc. So let's get started. Kyle, welcome to the show today.
Yes, thank you. And I think that this is really important. I think education just in general to our patients is so important. It saves time. You think, oh, I've got to take all this time educating the patient, or, is this going to disrupt my flow of whatever? And I think that when you incorporate it into your practice style and you have the opportunity to give answers before questions are even asked, I think that it saves you time down the road. You're not getting the emails from patients like, wait, hold on a second. What is this? What's a biosimilar? They dispensed a different drug than what we had talked about in clinic. And so I think that education is great. And as you mentioned, I think that, we as APPs do a really great job, and it's one of the aspects of my job that I enjoy the most. So
absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. I think if you can be prepared for what a patient is going to ask you and have that answer already in the back of your mind, not only, does it help you in terms of time management, but it also, I think, instills confidence from a patient standpoint on, okay, I trust what they're saying. They're very confident with what they're saying. I know that has worked really, really well for me the longer I've been in this field and have learned more when I'm talking to patients. And so hopefully, again, this episode really helps equip you with some of the common questions and then kind of know what might your answer be when you get asked this question so that you can be prepared. Well, okay, Kyle, so why don't you explain what exactly is a biosimilar? And of course, the next question a patient's going to ask, is this the same thing as a generic?
Right. And it's tricky because, you kind of need to meet your patients at the level where they're at, and generics make sense to them. They've been dealing with generics forever. They know, oh, there's this medicine that I was prescribed, and then there's the medicine that they give me that I can't pronounce, right? Mm-hmm. And so, I sometimes use that explanation as a segue into biosimilars, saying, a generic and a biosimilar are not exactly the same. So there are some key differences, right? Generic is, essentially kind of a carbon copy of the medication, right? So small drugs, small molecule type drugs that are synthesized in a lab, and they can replicate those with exact certainty, and so that is that's a generic. They may have different fillers, or they might look funny. It's like, hey, why do I have a yellow pill instead of my white pill that I usually have? And it's like, that's just different manufacturer, different binding agents, et cetera. And it's not exactly the same in the field of biologics, right? So biologics themselves are just very complex medications, right? We treat complex diseases. These medications are very complex, and I'll tell them, hey, a biologic medication is a very complicated protein that has been formulated or grown from living cells, or it's not as simple as just a tablet or whatever. Um, and so with the biosimilars, it's not an exact replica, right? One of the ways that, and I can't remember who explained it to me this way previously, but it's an analogy that I use with my patients that has worked really well. I tell patients that, the key components are there. The important things that are going to manage your disease are there. There may be some slight differences from your reference drug or name brand drug and the biosimilar. But the way that it was explained to me and at one point, and that makes sense, and I think makes sense for patients, is thinking of a key that unlocks a door, and you can go down to Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever, and you can get a copy made of your key. And it may not even look like the same key. That the part of the key that opens the lock is going to be the same thing, and that's what's important. But you can get them that have your favorite football team on them. You can get something that is very ornate. You can get things in different colors, and so it's not necessarily changing the part of the key, the important part, but other parts or other aspects may be not identical to the reference drug.
I love that analogy. I hadn't heard that before, but I think I'm going to start using that with patients, because I think it keeps it simple, but it also kind of makes it simple for us too, because sometimes I get a little bit stuck in the weeds, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm really even confusing myself. So I love that analogy. And I think maybe a next question that a patient might ask you or me would be, well, why would I do this? What are the benefits of using a biosimilar in rheumatology or with my disease?
Right. Yeah. And, I think that it's a valid question. Like, you get that even with generic, other medications, like, why can't I get the name brand or whatever? And it's the same kind of answer. It comes down to cost or insurance mandates. A lot of times, different patients have different drug plans. Different drug plans may, have a certain, I guess, contract or something that allows them to get reimbursements at different rates. And so it may just come down to as simple as that, the insurance company says, hey, we're not going to pay for, reference drug A, you have to go with biosimilar, B or C.
Yeah. And I that's exactly what I say. I say when someone says, well, why would I do this? Why would I change from X product that I've been on for this long of a time and I've done really well with this? Why do I have to do this? And, I say, well, it's really not up to me. It's not up to you. This is what your insurance is saying that you have to do. And, of course, you ultimately are in charge. You decide what you're going to inject into yourself or, get infused, but your insurance will not pay for that product anymore. And so in some ways, we don't have a choice. However, all that to say, that doesn't mean that I think you're getting some kind of lesser product or
Right.
something that is going to be dangerous or not going to work. And in fact, the more biosimilars that we have out there, the more patients that are going to have access to drug that may otherwise never have been able to. And so globally, when we look at this from a national standpoint, I think it's actually a really, really good thing. And again, I think a big part of it just comes down to the confidence when you're talking to a patient. And if you say, hey, and one other thing that I say is I would do it if I got this, from my insurance company saying you can no longer have X, but you can have biosimilar B and it is a biosimilar. I would do it. I would tell that to my family member. And usually when I say that, then they're okay with it. But what about the next question is, well, are biosimilars safe? What are the side effects of biosimilars?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important that we do. I think sometimes it's easy to kind of, wipe our hands of it and say, oh, the insurance company's making us do it, but also instilling confidence in the patient that even if the insurance is mandating it, it is something that has been studied thoroughly. that key is still going to unlock, the lock, right? So there's numerous studies that have been done in biosimilars and been able to demonstrate that they are safe and effective. That's how they get the designation of biosimilar. There are even there's an additional I guess nomenclature that can go along with some biosimilars that they can have interchangeability, right? And so which does bring up a little bit of another can of worms. And as far as interchangeability is concerned, these are medications or biosimilars that have gone through additional tests, switch testing, right? Where you start off on reference drug and then you get switched over to the biosimilar, then they switch you back, or vice versa, right? And so they're monitoring to make sure that there is no clinical difference. There are no new side effects. There are no other issues arising, so that they can say this is an interchangeable medication. One of the things that I think some clinicians and folks might have a little bit of a concern with is that with interchangeability, sometimes that interchange can happen at the pharmacy level, or so you may say, hey, I'm going to prescribe this, and then the pharmacy of choice dispenses biosimilar A, B, or C, and sometimes they tell you, sometimes they don't. And so again, getting ahead of the situation, telling your patients, hey, look, this is what I'm prescribing. Depending on your insurance, they may come back and say, you got to, be with this or that or the other. Different states also have laws pertaining to interchangeability. But again, bottom line, these medications are safe. They don't go through the exact same testing that was done to get the reference drug, because we have all that data from the reference drug. And so they need to demonstrate safety and efficacy in I guess, a smaller sample size or a smaller amount of studies that need to be done to help back up that, hey, yes, this is a safe and effective drug, just like the reference drug that had all of this mountain of data behind it.
Absolutely. And I that's exactly how I talk to my patients too. And again, it's instilling that confidence. It's saying, yes, these are safe. Yes, the side effect profile should be the exact as the reference product. And these drugs are tested. And, again, ultimately, it's a good thing. And ultimately, it's going to be okay. So what about the next question of, okay, I'm the patient. I'm saying, well, what resources are there for me? And, how do I learn more about biosimilars?
Right. Yeah. So before we jump into there, one of the other things that sometimes I'll bring up to patients is, this concept of biosimilars is fairly new to us, but it's not new worldwide, right? So in other countries that have mandated healthcare systems or universal healthcare systems, the biosimilars have been used, and there's a lot of data, and you can get some of that switch or interchangeability data that helps back that up from European studies as well. So I mean, this isn't, it may be new to us in rheumatology and in the United States, but it's not necessarily a brand new concept, worldwide. And so sometimes that's a little bit reassuring for patients as well. But as far as resources, that's a great question. I think, number one resources is us, right? We are the resource for our patient, and we start the conversation. But yes, there are patients that are going to want to dig a little bit deeper. ACR, American College of Rheumatology website actually has a great patient handout that you can print out where, one-page summary. And it goes over a lot of these questions. Hey, what is a biosimilar? Is it a generic? What are the differences? How are these tested? Are they safe? And so, sometimes, when we're sitting with our patients and we're going over all of the things that we have to do in the visit, I think it's good to give some, additional education to take home with them, and you can hand this, hey, look, this is that handout on biosimilars that we talked about. And so again, you may be getting, you're because oftentimes we don't know, and I don't know unless you're able to remember all of the intricacies of all of the insurances, but I certainly can't. A lot of times when we're prescribing these, we don't know, is the insurance company going to mandate A, B, or C? And so, I'll tell them, hey, look, this is the medication. And oftentimes I will reference the reference drug, the name brand drug, and say that you may be given a biosimilar. And this is what a biosimilar is, and you can give them this resource. I'm certain that I'm not as familiar with all of the different biosimilar companies out there, all of the pharma companies, but I'm sure that they have also great resources. I don't know. What do you use?
Yeah, I mean, I think the ACR is great. I think they have a lot of really good patient resources. And yeah, I mean, I think that is something else too, is to say, okay, you're being prescribed, X medicine, X biosimilar. Go to their website. I'm sure they will have information for you too.
Right.
And hopefully, the transition, because the one thing I was a little bit cautious or concerned about was, okay, I know what kind of resources the patient has with this medicine. I don't exactly know what kind of resources are available for biosimilar. Like, is it going to be the same? Are they going to have the same patient services, et cetera? Sharps container. I mean, all these different things. And at least thus far, I do think that most of the companies are providing similar resources because they've heard loud and clear that that's what patients want. And so I would say to a patient, yeah, utilize those resources too. But I couldn't agree more. I feel like we are the best resource for our patient. And when we talk to our patients, hopefully they don't have a ton of additional questions. But then, yeah, guiding them to ACR or the company website, I think is great. What about if a patient asks you, well, am I going to notice a difference in how I feel or how the treatment works if I switch to a biosimilar? What do you say?
Yeah. So again, trying to give reassurance that you shouldn't. Essentially, you should be able to transition over to this medication and have a similar efficacy that you're already receiving on the reference drug. Um, I think that in some of the drugs that have that interchangeability, additional nomenclature, that might be a little bit easier of a sell to them. But yeah, essentially, I try to give reassurance, right? I tell them, hey, I understand. These patients have gone from a place where they have been so uncomfortable and they have had so many issues with their disease, and it's really scary to think, oh my gosh, I'm going to be mandated to go onto this other drug that I'm not familiar with. Am I going to feel differently on this other medication? Is it going to work as well? Am I going to regress and go back to that way that I used to feel? Because nobody wants that, and we don't want that for our patients either. So
Right.
again, I think giving reassurance that no, you shouldn't feel differently. But also, if you do, let us know. Obviously, right?
Absolutely. That's what I say. And I also, just to help, again, instill that level of, safety and all those things, I say, in my experience, I'm not hearing of patients having issues, I mean, and at this point, had you asked me this question a few months ago, I mean, I only had really experience with the infusions, but now that we're
Right.
also seeing this with the sub-Qs, that really is what I'm seeing. I mean, it is rare that I have somebody call and say, I did not do well with the biosimilar. I want to go back. I mean, I'm just not hearing it. And so I also kind of say that as well because they want to know what our experience is also. Now, of course, we are still going to have patients that are going to still not want to do it. So what if you hear, what options do I have if I refuse to go on a biosimilar?
Right. Yeah. So this is actually funny. I kind of like sometimes when the insurance says, hey, you got to switch to a biosimilar, and the patient is like, no, I don't want to do that, because I think it also gives us an opportunity to really examine that patient and say, because again, patient is thinking, hey, I was so bad before, and how are they doing now? Because sometimes they'll be doing pretty good, but they're still having flares. And so it gives you an opportunity to re-examine, well, are you on the right mechanism of action? Is there something that, maybe we just need to switch you to a different mechanism of action completely? Was, reference drug A actually doing, the best that we can expect? And so, yeah, there are going to be some patients that will say, I don't want to do a biosimilar. Um, I think that our hands are a little bit tied in getting them to stay on the reference drug. So, I mean, if their fight is, well, I refuse to go to a biosimilar, I'm going to stay on reference drug, whatever. It's like, okay, well, you may not qualify, for any assistance, or it may be an uphill battle. But again, using that as an opportunity to say, hey, that's that's a valid concern that you have. You don't want to go on to this biosimilar medication, and maybe we look at, one of these other mechanisms of action that are, name brand, that don't have a biosimilar if that's their concern.
Yeah, I agree. And, in a setting like that, I mean, there are times where we have to have tough conversations with our patients. And I would probably say something like, well, ultimately you decide what you put in your body. You are in charge. You can call your insurance company, you could talk to them. I'm telling you that it will not work for me to try to appeal this if you've not tried it. It will not work. It just won't. And, then we're obviously wasting everybody's time. And, I see a lot of patients every day, and I know that that is a lot of staff time. I obviously want what's best for the patient, of course, always. But then I think if somebody ultimately says they just refuse to do it, well, then, I say, well, okay, you do have the option of paying out of pocket. I don't know anybody that could do that, but, you do
Right.
have that option. You can look into patient resources. Again, to your point, we can really examine if this is the right drug for you. But then they may need to consider changing insurances. I mean, to a different insurance that covers whatever drug it is, So, I think in some ways we do have to put some of the responsibility onto the patient as well. If, especially if they're kind of not really wanting to do what we're recommending, or that is required by their insurance company.
Right. And even, giving them the option to contact the reference drug manufacturer, right? Oh, you call, the pharmaceutical company that manages reference drug A, and you tell them, hey, my insurance wants me to switch. What are my options? Maybe they have a clever solution that they can come up with, or that they can help. Right. They obviously want them to be on their drug just as much as, any other drug company wants them to be on their drug. Right. So yeah, giving them that option, saying, hey, you may have to do some legwork, and it may work out, it may not, and we may have to explore other options.
Right. Well, and this last question I have for you is one that I definitely get asked frequently. Okay, I get it, Amanda. I have to do this. I'm willing to do this. You've made me obviously feel good about this. What if it doesn't work? What if I don't respond to it? I have a side effect from it. Am I able to go back to the original drug? What do you say?
Yeah. So a couple of things to think about there. If their concern is, because some of our patients are pretty savvy, they know that there can be autoantibodies for medications. And sometimes we, talk to them about, hey, if you delay your medications, you may start to develop these autoantibodies. Some of those switch trials, with the reference drugs have shown that it doesn't create immunogenicity, which is a good reassuring thing that you can say, yes, you potentially can go back as long as your insurance allows, right? It shouldn't cause any problems with, if you go off of the reference drug onto the biosimilar and then you go back, it doesn't necessarily mean that the reference drug won't work anymore. It's just going to be a matter of, will your insurance make an exception if you have a side effect? I think that as we get more and more biosimilars on the market, boy, it's probably going to be more difficult to say you're going to go back on the reference drug. It'll probably be, no, you didn't. You failed biosimilar A. Well, now you got to do a biosimilar B and C and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
Kind of a hard question, but
Yeah, that's exactly how I answer it. And I kind of say, you know what? I really do think 5 years from now, it's probably going to be just mainstay, and people aren't going to be asking, because there'll be a lot more experience, I think, with it. And as soon as that happens, then I think everyone will feel a little bit more comfortable with it. Those are my questions. Is there anything else that you can think of, or anything else we didn't talk about that you'd want to talk about with patients?
yeah, other than just reiterating the fact that the more that we get in front of the education, I think it's better. I think that patients, they may have questions and they're afraid to ask. If we're bringing up their concerns before they actually, before they voice them to us, if they're not, if they're afraid of voicing them, or if they end up having that concern after the fact, they go home and they think it over, they're mulling it over, and then they send that email, and then that takes, some more time out of your day and, everything else. Like, just get ahead of it and educate them up front. I think that's the best thing we can do for our patients.
Absolutely. Well, again, as we wrap up today, I really want to thank you because your insights are invaluable. And, I think it's so awesome having you here. I think obviously it's very easy to see why your patients love you and why you are such a good communicator. And so, anyways, thank you so much for being here and answering these questions.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for having me again. Always a pleasure. And, and likewise, I think that, your insights are always valuable. I know I've said this before, but, you're one of these people that, as I was coming into rheumatology, that I looked up to, and I still do. And I think that you've got, great insights. I appreciate all that you've done for, for APPs that are interested in rheumatology, and, everything that you've done to educate us, and in turn, we educate our patients. So.
Oh, well, thank you for the kind words. And thank you to our listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Also submitting your questions, because that's really helpful for us as we are thinking about, what do you need? So we really do appreciate that. We really hope that this episode helps for you to feel more equipped and confident when you're discussing biosimilars with your patients. Remember, you're not just providing care, you're also educating, and which is a vital part of what our role is. And I think we all know this. Obviously, please make sure to subscribe to RhAPPcast on your favorite podcast platform to stay up to date with our latest episodes, which we have an entire biosimilar series as well. So if you want to really get into the weeds of that, please listen, because I think it really is very helpful. I know I learned a ton when we were going through that. And please don't forget to explore the growing RhAPP ecosystem further. We have rhap.org. You can connect with us on Twitter at RhAPP and Instagram at RhAPP for the latest updates, insights, and exciting announcements. So until then, I'm Amanda Mixon signing off.